Good evening, everyone. We are going to get started in about a minute, but while we give folks a chance to join, if you can please use your camera to go to the QR code you see here. We're going to introduce ourselves shortly, but we also want to know who you are. So if you'd use the link to answer a few questions, we'll share a collective introduction for who's in attendance with us tonight a bit later in the webinar. So folks can use that QR code, just answer a few questions. And I want to be respectful of time. It's 7:01 Eastern time, so let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, and welcome to the live webinar for the Green Journal special issue on racism and reproductive health. My name is Ebony Carter, and I'm honored to serve as the inaugural Associate Editor for Equity at the Green Journal. Our purpose tonight is to share a broad overview of what we hope to collectively accomplish through this issue and to provide some guidance and direction to potential authors. Here with me tonight in service to this goal are 6 representatives of our Special Issue Steering Committee who will introduce themselves to you. I've copied the QR code from the last slide for those of you who are just joining us, so please use your camera to go there if you're willing to share a little bit with us about yourself. And now to introduce the panel, I'll turn it over to Dr. Guzman to begin.
Gracias. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cyril Estela Vázquez Guzman. I go by she, her, hers, ella. I'm an assistant professor at Oregon Health Science University, and I'm a medical sociologist by training. I identify as a first-generation Latina ESL Indigenous immigrant woman, and I'm very honored to be here. Muchas gracias.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rose Horton, and I am a nurse by education and passion, and serve as the Executive Director of Women and Infant Services in Atlanta, Georgia. I identify as Caribbean, African American. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm delighted to be here.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Malavika Prabhu, and I'm a maternal fetal medicine specialist at Mass General Hospital in Boston, and also an editorial board member of the Green Journal. I identify as a South Asian, first-generation cisgender female. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rochelle Smith. I'm a patient turned partner on behalf of the St. Louis Integrated Health Network. I identify as a Black African American woman, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm also excited to be here.
Good evening, friends and colleagues. My name is Dr. Jennifer Whitehair. I'm a Navajo OBGYN physician practicing on the Navajo Reservation in Tuba City, Arizona, and thank you for having me.
I also want to acknowledge that our editor-in-chief, Dr. Jason Wright, and managing editor, Ms. Stephanie Casway, are in attendance tonight and are available to help field questions at the end. On behalf of the Green Journal, I want to extend a special thanks to all of our panelists and the members of the steering committee, whom they represent, who are giving so graciously of their time and talent to assure that we use this opportunity to the fullest, to elevate the collective consciousness of racism and reproductive health among obstetricians and gynecologists and other readers of the Green Journal, so that we can all do better. I also want to say that I fully acknowledge and respect the credentials and expertise of my esteemed colleagues on the panel, which you see displayed here, but we have mutually agreed to be on a first-name basis with one another tonight. So let's get started. In the next few moments, we'd like to share our mission and vision, the timeline for making it happen, and what we're thinking about in terms of content and instructions. Even if you don't submit a paper, there are other ways to get involved with the special issue. So we'll conclude our structured presentation there and open the floor to questions and answers until the top of the hour when we'll adjourn. Feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom to enter your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll get to as many of the questions as possible. As a housekeeping note, there are QR codes throughout for your reference if you want to have a camera ready, but access to the slide deck will be provided to all in attendance tonight and available on the special issue website, which we'll also provide at the end of the webinar. Is to build a journal that is equitable, diverse, and inclusive in our content and composition. But we have to go beyond that. We are striving to apply equity to our goals, policies, standards, operations, practices, culture, and climate with humility. And I emphasize the humility part because none of us claim to have all of the answers or to always do everything right. But that's not actually our goal. Our goal is to constantly strive to press towards the mark of equality through all of our editorial processes and procedures. You'll see that I've noted draft here because this is very much a work in progress, and we'd love to hear any thoughts and suggestions you might have through the chat function. The special issue devoted to issues of racism and reproductive health is part of that mission, and I want to turn now more specifically to our vision for this issue. Let me preface my remarks by recognizing and embracing that we have so much work to do. There are so many isms, and in the middle here, we see the intersectional identities that connect all of them. But let me be clear. The focus of this issue is racism and the intersectional identities located therein. That is not to take away anything from other forms of oppression, and this issue is not the beginning nor the end of our work to dismantle oppression in all forms. But the order for tonight is racism. When we committed to produce a special issue devoted to racism earlier this year, we embraced a few core values that I want to share with you here. First, the issue needs to be open access, not behind a paywall, and open and accessible to everyone. Of course, I had no money when we made that declaration, but I think we've just about got it covered now. Next, we wanted to open up the table and warmly welcome more people to join it. I'm just going to be honest and say that since I took this position, I can't tell you how many people have told me, I don't submit to the Green Journal because people don't think there's space for them. Now let's just tell it like it is. A very small percentage of submitted manuscripts end up being published in the Green Journal across the board, and it's highly competitive. But everyone should feel welcome to submit to this issue. We hope to see authors, reviewers, and readers who have never engaged with the Green before. And hopefully it will become obvious why as we take a deeper dive into potential content. We want this issue to serve as a source document for future reproductive health equity scholars as they try to employ the most rigorous methods to study these issues and produce work that can move the needle. We want to move from problem definition to solutions. More on that later. We want to break the cycle of cumulative disadvantage that you see depicted here. It is no accident that people with certain identities are systematically underrepresented in academic publishing. And this has consequences on multiple fronts, including lower likelihood of having papers accepted, receiving grants, funding, and stunted career trajectories. Our hope here is to interrupt the cycle of injustice and elevate the work of scholars who are doing phenomenal work that has been historically underrepresented and undervalued in academic publishing. And so we've given ourselves permission to experiment and to innovate. We're not going to be confined by traditional boundaries of academic publishing. The fact of the matter is that scientists and scientific journals have the opportunity to facilitate best practices and ultimately impact racial and ethnic disparities. The written interpretations of science by a few shape the future creation of history and science for many. Friends gathered here tonight, we are the few, and we have a real opportunity to move the needle for the people we serve. I've given you an aspirational overview, but I know that you actually tuned in tonight to hear the nuts and bolts of how to get your stuff published. So Riz is going to pick up here with our timeline to publication.
Thanks, Ebony. It feels like time is flying, but believe it or not, the call for papers for the special issue was published and went out over social media in June. The July edition of the Green Journal contained an equity editorial outlining the journal's early steps in the journey, which included the special issue. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I encourage you to do so because it provides a nice, succinct overview. I'm including the QR code here so you can scan it for ease of access. We're here in October now for the live webinar, and in the coming months, the Green Journal leadership, including the editor-in-chief, the deputy and associate editors, editorial board members, and members of the steering committee will be going through anti-racism and bias and peer review training. We realize that we can't keep doing the same thing the same way and expect different results. That's insanity. Manuscripts requesting consideration for the special issue are due by February 1st. I'd encourage you, though, to wait until late January before submitting your manuscript because the steering committee will likely release some additional guidance in early January. Make sure that you explicitly state that your manuscript is for the special issue in your cover letter. The peer review process will extend into the summer, and we expect the online version to be available in mid-September, and the print edition will be in your hands by next October. First and foremost, there are no hard and fast rules. Let's be creative. We're not afraid to experiment. We're not afraid of innovation, which is super exciting. Composition research is a team sport, and diverse perspectives not only regard to personal identity, but discipline and lived experiences and expertise are valued. The inclusion of diverse study team members and stakeholders who are familiar with the research can elevate all phases of the research. We will be paying attention to the study team composition in the review of the submitted papers. A lot of literature in this space can be summarized by people from racial group X have terrible outcomes, period, the end. That's insufficient to move the needle, and hence that will not be published here. We're really looking for papers that take a strength-based, solution-driven approach to address racism and reproductive health. It's okay to define the problem as well as meaningful, actionable steps to affect change. The call for papers included examples of potentially relevant topics of the issue, and it's included in the QR code so that you can see examples. But I want to emphasize that our focus is on broad topics of interest for all potential authors. We won't be fielding questions about specific topics or ideas or manuscripts. And we encourage authors to frame their results with conceptual models whenever possible. In the special issue, we encourage submission that have utilized collaborative research models such as community-based participatory research and equitably involve communities in their own research. We have a saying in our hospital, nothing about us without us. It's important to recognize patients, community leaders, and scientists that experience racial disparities can provide unique perspective based on their lived experiences. Next, the work of scientists who've done the foundational work in this area and are often from marginalized communities and groups should be cited because they have far too long been overlooked. We encourage authors to use people first and affirming language. Finally, unless the study specifically looks at genetic admixture testing, please do not rely on genetics as an explanation for disparities because race is fundamentally a social construct. It's my pleasure to turn it over to Rochelle.
Thanks, Rose. We want to emphasize that the special issue table is wide open, and we welcome you to come to it, even if you've never done anything with the Green Journal before. In particular, we encourage submissions from those among us with the lived experience of racism, people like me, a patient turned partner. I understand that the impact that mistrust has in the medical system that affects my community. So I'm using my voice to improve health outcomes for women and birthing people who may need someone to advocate for them and empower them to do the same for themselves and others. As a steering committee, we sat down and dreamed a little bit about what we saw in the special issue, and we want to share that vision with you. The research letter format can be used for a rapid fire promising practice article type. Maybe you're doing something that really seems to be working well at your institution, and while you may not have done a randomized control trial, you have some pilot data to share that can be hypothesis generating for others. We'd also like to explore some thematic areas with a particular interest in reproductive health equity research missions and how to use data, particularly large data sets, quality improvement, and policy and/or institutional level reforms. Finally, it warrants saying that we encourage qualitative and mixed methods research. So please don't feel like it's not worth submitting it because you don't think the Green Journal is going to take it. And the final point is near and dear to my heart as a patient turned partner. Authors are not limited to traditional PhD or physician scientist researchers. We're interested in stories and content from patients and community members leading promising initiatives. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Estella so she can discuss some of the review's considerations for the special issue.
Thanks, Rochelle. So we're actively working to make sure that all submissions really address the needs of historically excluded and marginalized communities at the Green Journal. The goal for us is really to provide a fair and equitable review. These are the kind of reflective questions that we'll be asking during the review process. And so essentially we're asking us to be bold and really jump outside of our comfort zone, our fishbowl, despite all the real pressures there are for us to stay inside but really address and identify the unknown, our biases, both conscious and unconscious. Our goal is to create a comprehensive review where equity is prioritized and where there is a space for everyone to be included. This slide is not only for potential authors, but also for potential reviewers. First, evaluate your team's diversity composition. A recent podcast showed that manuscripts with more diverse teams are significantly more likely to get cited because of their extensive network and diversity that brings innovative ideas and contributions. Second, evaluate that reference list for inclusivity. Research has shown that there is a lot and often a significant racial, ethnic, and gender imbalance in article reference lists, and that Black women's work is disproportionately not credited or even cited as often as white authors' work. We included here a list of other reflective questions for us to consider for both authors and reviewers as we review all the submissions. I won't take long to read all of them to you now, but these slides will be available to you following the webinar. The point is that we can collectively together mitigate some of these inequities by asking authors and reviewers to carefully consider their submissions with this potential source of conscious and unconscious bias in mind. And finally, it bears repeating, as Rose mentioned earlier, that submissions cannot end with just nothing more than a problem definition and must really thoroughly consider the next steps and larger implications. Our communities, my communities, are tired of hearing what we already know. What are we doing to move that needle? What would it take for us to get to impact and transformational change, systemic change? Just like there are reporting recommendations for observational studies or randomized control trials, we're including here an equity review sample for your reference. This is a sample reporting recommendation for papers addressing health equity that's used by AHA journals. This editorial leadership team and the steering committee are still discussing reporting recommendations for the special issue. And so I want to really iterate that you are all here today not only to learn about our review process, but also to submit your ideas. This is a process and it takes all of us to be transformative. Any and all updates will be sent to this email distribution list of this webinar and also will be blasted on social media in early January. But as you start thinking about your paper and start framing, we really are asking you to look at this as a good start to place. I'll turn it over to Jen now to discuss author positionality.
Thanks, Estella. Authors for the special issue are encouraged but not required to submit positionality statements with their disclosures. For those of you who aren't familiar with this concept, positionality statements are similar to author contribution statements and give authors the opportunity to transparently report how their identities may influence or relate to the research at hand and their potential bias. These statements also clarify the extent to which the study population is represented scientifically and is meant to encourage diverse collaborative teams. For example, my positionality statement would be, I am a Navajo Dene woman. My research interests are a direct reflection of my lived experiences on the Navajo reservation and the concern for health equity in an underrepresented and socially disadvantaged population. So I'm telling the reader how I identify and also presenting my bias as someone who has lived and received care in this setting. Another sample positionality statement is included here. For example, when the manuscript for this article was drafted, one author self-identified as US Black American and 4 authors self-identified as US White American. It is also worth noting that these recommendations should not be limited to race. Authors should address intersectionality and other relevant identities as well. However, we want to be clear that this is not a mandate and authors should not disclose any aspect of their identities unless they fully consent and are comfortable doing so. We also want to emphasize that you should not feel excluded by the positionality statement. We know that this is hard and radically different from what we typically do, so we want to provide some additional support. The following reflective questions are designed to help authors consider the way that their personal identities may impact their work. I won't take the time to read them all to you here, but you will have access to the slide deck following the webinar. We hope that these reflective questions will be helpful in drafting positionality statements if authors choose to include them. And we hope you do, and help us to normalize this practice. And now I'll hand it over to Malavika for the closing thoughts for the structured portion of the webinar.
Thanks, Jennifer. We want to close this portion of the webinar by recognizing that the special issue fits into a larger action plan at the Green Journal to promote health equity. Some of our early steps were mentioned in the July editorial and are included again here. Be on the lookout in 2023 for the launch of new mentorship and training programs. We also want to emphasize that the special issue marks the beginning and not the end of a very deliberate effort. We'll actively be looking for ways to institutionalize the lessons learned from this special issue as we strive to dismantle oppression in all forms. This slide is included for your reference and includes QR codes to the equity editorial, which summarizes much of what we've said tonight, and the call for papers, which I hope everyone knows are due on February 1st. We also welcome new reviewers at the Green Journal to help us review all of the papers we hope we'll receive in response to this call and going forward. If you'd like to sign up to be a reviewer, please use the QR code on the bottom right. We want to especially thank the Green Journal editorial leadership team and staff led by Editor-in-Chief, Dr. Jason Wright, and Managing Editor, Stephanie Casway, and the members of the steering committee listed here who behind the scenes are dedicating countless hours to ensuring integrity in the scientific review process, as well as the publication process for both the special issue and papers in the Green Journal going forward. And with that, I'll hand it over to Melissa.
Good evening, everyone. So I would like to first hand it back to Dr. Carter so that she can go over some of the results of our starting survey, which are really important. And then we'll start the Q&A.
Thanks so much, Melissa. So from our starting results, we wanted to give you that data back. So 59% of the participants tonight have not submitted to the Green Journal in the past. 65% have not reviewed for the Green Journal in the past. In terms of the type of research that all of us do, 47% do quantitative, 20% do qualitative, 27% perform mixed methods research, and 7% classify their research as other. And over 50% of the attendees on the webinar tonight self-identify with groups with historically marginalized identities. So we wanted to give that information back to you in terms of who's here tonight. And I just want to say thank you to our entire panel on behalf of the editorial leadership team at the Green Journal and the steering committee for the special issue. Thanks so much to all of you for attending tonight. Special thanks to our panelists. We have your email addresses and we will send any special issue updates as they become available. Please give us a few days, but the slide deck from today, a recording of this presentation, and frequently asked questions based on what you all asked us tonight will be available on the website in the coming days. So if there is nothing else, then have a wonderful evening, and we hope to reconnect in early 2023 with all of you, either because you're submitting or reviewing for this special issue. So thanks so much and good evening.